If you want to participate, contact me at ordinarywomenpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure you have great projects to brag about. You can also follow me and message me on Instagram at ordinarywomenpodcast, on Twitter at ordinarywomenpc, or on Facebook on the page Ordinary Women. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Ordinary Women. I'm welcoming Rachel today. Hi Rachel.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great too, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Honestly, it's my pleasure.
Can you start by giving us a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm 20 years old, born and raised in London, and I work with Lucy and one of the Kiaras that you would have heard previously. I also am an entrepreneur, so I have my own stationery store, and not gonna lie, I do a lot of other things, but I think we're gonna keep it there for now.
And can you tell us something unusual about yourself?
Right now, I'm knitting myself a dress, which I'm really hoping to wear on my birthday.
This is so cool. Oh,
yeah,
nice.
It's not going well, but I'm trying. So I've been knitting for 10 years now. I taught myself when I was 10. And so I thought it would be cool for the 10th anniversary of me knowing how to knit to create a new project and to design something for myself. So I decided I wanted to make a dress, which I could wear on my 21st birthday. And I'm nowhere near done. So I'm just going to try my best to get it done. Hopefully I can get it done before the summer, because it will be way too hot to wear it once we get to like July and August, but we'll see. I'm really excited for it. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's so cool. Oh, nice. Can't wait to see it. Since here we talk about what it's like to be a woman, I like to start the conversation by asking you, was there a time when you realized you are a woman?
I feel like I have to remind myself sometimes. Mm-hmm. So often I will just refer to myself as being like a girl or being a teenager. I am 20, so I'm not a teenager anymore, but I think I'm very much used to it. I'm very much in the habit of just referring to myself as being like young and being a teenager. But I feel like there's two moments where I distinctly remember knowing that I was a woman and being very cognizant of it. I think the first one was when I went to uni. I was in the car with my parents and I just came to the conclusion nobody would let a teenage girl out of their house and go and live an independent life. Like, I'm not a teenager anymore and I'm not a girl anymore. I'm actually like a big person. I'm a big woman now. So I think that was one moment where I really came to realize I'm not a girl anymore. I actually am a young lady. I'm a woman. And then there's been a couple of random situations in which guys have tried to flirt with me, and in my head I'm like, please back away. I'm too young for any of your advances. And so that's occurred, and then I've had to sort of retrain myself to think this is actually legal because oftentimes when this happened, my response would be, I'm 17 or like I'm 15, I'm too young. Please like step away from me. And now I can't really do that because I'm of legal age for people to flirt with me. I just still feel uncomfortable about it.
New answer could be just no.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you for sharing this. Very interesting. And did you grow up with any feminine role model?
I think I'm very lucky that I grew up with 4 older sisters. So I don't think I was ever short of having a feminist role model or somebody that I could look up to. However, I did also look beyond the 4 walls of my house. I tried to look elsewhere to see people who I could like look up to and aspire to be. And I guess as a young black girl, I have always loved Michelle Obama. She's always been an icon for me. Someone who, not just being like the wife to the president of the US, she really made a role for her own, and she really like championed the rights and things that she wanted to support. So I always found her really, really inspiring. And then there's loads of other people really. I love the work that Naomi Campbell's done beyond her role as being like a supermodel. She's done loads of charitable things, so that's super exciting to see. And I feel like there's so many women. I feel like more so I admire elements of people's lives rather than the way that they carry themselves throughout their entire lives. I'm just hyper conscious that I love the career that somebody's achieved. I love the way that somebody's achieved their work-life balance, or the way that they challenge gender norms and things like that. So I more so pick and choose what I aspire to be like and the role models who I have.
That's very cool.
Thank you.
And so today, would it be the same role models? Do you have new role models?
I definitely still love Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
I don't think that will change anytime soon. I don't think I have changed my role models, but I think I've probably been introduced to more. So at university, I study politics, philosophy, and economics. So studying modules in feminist philosophy, I've come across more people who I love their work, I'm really interested in it, and I aspire to be like a bit more. So like, I love Bell Hooks now. I studied her in my second year of uni, and so reading her work and understanding how much she prioritizes and centralizes love within relationships and how she manages to do that and balances that with her feminist work, I've always thought was super beautiful. So I can definitely add her to the list.
That's so cool. And what do you think they taught you?
I've learned so much. I think it's really hard to summarize what the influences of women have done in my life, just because I've been surrounded by them all of my life. But I definitely have always been taught to aspire. So whatever I want to do, I can achieve, providing that I work towards it. So I think all of my notions of hard work and working hard to achieve my dreams have come from my family and come from people around me, because I'm very conscious that with all of the female role models who I have, all of the women who I aspire to be like in different areas, they didn't just passively come across what they currently have, or they didn't just like walk into the path by accident. They very much worked towards where they are now and who they've become today. So working hard is definitely something which I've learned from being around many an inspiring women.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. I felt that I've come to that realization, but a bit late. But yeah, it's crazy how, I don't know, I would never before think about what these women would have done or like how much they worked. And then one day you're like, oh, but actually you read something about someone just like she started just because like she was working in something, some random thing, and then you build on that. It's crazy. Thank you for sharing.
No worries.
And would you say the lack of representation of women in society had an impact on you?
Definitely. I have constantly been challenged by the fact that in a lot of industries which I've looked at, as a black woman, I've noticed that black women are only portrayed in particular ways. I'm going to use as an example the media and especially TV. So when you're looking on TV, you tend to see particular stereotypes of like the sassy black girl or the sassy female black sidekick who is very straight talking, kind of uncensored at times, and is very carefree about the way that other people think of her. So in that aspect and in that area of life, I've constantly seen that like black women are shown in a particular way. You don't often get to see diverse female characters who display and express different emotions aside from anger, annoyance, joy, humor, things like that. And so I think that really affected me in my childhood, because not seeing those people, you don't really know like how many avenues and how much space you have to express yourself within your realm of emotions. And so as a child and in my younger years, I definitely feel like I fell into that stereotype because I was assimilating with the things which I already see. But now I'm very grateful to see more diverse characters, watching shows like Insecure and Dynasty and Empire, although it's not the greatest example, and Euphoria as well. I feel like they give me the opportunity to see black women and black girls in a light which I can relate to, in a way that I can sort of see myself in those roles. Also, as a child, I felt very much the same in books. I feel like with books in the literary scene, we started to see the representation of BAME, black, Asian, ethnic minority characters a lot earlier on. So I remember reading The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon when I was maybe 14, 15, and recognizing a character who was the main protagonist of a book, who expressed the same emotions, who carried the same thought processes as me, and realizing, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because I didn't really get to see that as much in books, especially the books that I read at school. I feel like I was a big reader at the time, so I very much leaned into the sort of literature and the books I was reading, and not seeing myself in them and not seeing somebody that I could 100% relate to definitely impacted me. But I'm grateful now that we have that kind of like representation.
Cool. And so you have a few nieces, right?
I do. I have 5 nieces.
Oh.
Along with my 4 sisters. We're just a lot of women.
Family, that's
A
so
lot of
great.
strong women, yeah.
Would you recommend some particular content to them so that they can access what you didn't have growing up?
I certainly would. I think fortunately now, as I'm growing up and as time is progressing, there is more and more accessibility when it comes to literature and media which features Black people, both men, women, non-binary people as well. And I'm hyper conscious that there's a lot of it which I haven't even looked into, and there's a lot that I haven't really explored and discovered. So there's so much space for my nieces and future generations to sort of like find their own path within that. However, there's definitely a lot of literature, like a lot of books which I read when I was younger, which I would recommend to them. So things like novels by Nicola Yoon and Tomi Adeyemi, because she writes Black fantasy literature. She's currently writing, because I don't think it's finished, the Children of Blood and Bone series, which is a New York Times bestseller. Also, one exciting thing is that my sister is actually a writer, and her book's going to be coming out in 2023, so April next year. And so hopefully when my nieces come of age, they will have something which is not only representative of them being Black women, but also very similar culture, because my sister writes about our experiences almost in a more fictionalized way. So much more that they can relate to.
This is so great. Are you like to say the title of the book?
Yes, I can say the title. The title is Rootless, and it's by Krystle, Zara, Appiah, and it will come out in April 2023.
Exciting. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Oh, can I share some book recommendations?
Yeah.
Because I just generalized. So I think there are some really good non-fiction coming of age books which are out at the moment, which not necessarily I would want my nieces to read now, but as they get a bit older and they start questioning things like what it truly means to be a woman in the 21st century, what is it like to develop into a woman? So like when you're growing and progressing through puberty and things like that. So I think the books that I would recommend are like The Black Girl's Guide to Glowing Up, which is a book which was written by the creators of the Black Girls Book Club, which is an organisation which focuses on literature and reading featuring Black and minority ethnic characters. So I would definitely recommend that one, because it was created as a guide to young Black girls who want to have those questions answered about what it means to be an adult and what it means to grow up in this world and potentially some of the challenges that they might face. So I definitely recommend that one. And then Taking Up Space by Ore Ogunbiyi and Chelsea Kwache. That one's a really good one, and it was published by Murky Books a couple of years ago. I think it came out just before I went to uni, and it documents the stories and some of the advice and tips that Chelsea and Ore wanted to share with their younger selves. And so I think that's a really beautiful one in terms of as you're progressing into adulthood and you're progressing into independent life, whether you're going to university or not. I think it provides some really useful advice and tips.
Thank you so much for sharing.
No worries.
And I'll put the titles in the show notes as
Yeah,
well.
I'll send them to you.
Yes, please. Cool. Always keen on books recommendations. Have you read Michelle Obama's Autobiography?
Oh, Becoming.
Yeah.
See, I've started it, but I feel like it's one of those books where if I'm not sitting down to fully focus on it, I don't want to like properly read it, because I don't want to half-heartedly read it. It's something that I want to read and savor. So I've started it. I'm not all the way through it, but it definitely is something that I'll finish, and then I'll go on to Barack Obama's book, which is massive.
Both look so interesting. I haven't started either yet, but
you have time. And just as a tip, I think that the BBC has published the audiobook of Barack Obama's A Promised Land. So if anybody wants to go and listen to that, I'm quite sure it's free on BBC Sounds. It will take you a while to listen to it though. It is a long book, but I'm so sure that it'll be really beautiful to listen to or read, whichever one you choose.
yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing.
No worries.
We talked quite a lot about all the people, so let's focus on you now. It's that time of the podcast.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, I'd like to hear about like one project or life achievement or something that you did and that you're proud of. What do you want to talk about?
I think the one I'm going to go for is the work that I've been doing into decolonizing the curriculum. So during my second year of university, I was given the opportunity to apply for a grant. So I applied with 2 other people to do a report on decolonizing the curriculum, particularly in the politics department, because I am a politics, philosophy, econ student. So we have been working on doing focus groups, interviewing staff and students, and understanding what their experiences are, studying at university and studying a curriculum which isn't particularly diverse. And then in addition to that, we are also looking at the implications that undiverse or a very narrow-minded curriculum can have on people when they go into their future roles. Because a lot of people from my university, we found, were going into roles in public service. So that might have meant local government, it might have meant working for a council, it might have meant working as a teacher or working for the government in some kind of way. But if they had only studied a certain avenue or a few people within their degrees, then what would that mean when they go on to express their viewpoints to students or children in the classroom? Or how would that affect the way that they deal with people in the public or their colleagues or people that they're meant to be helping within their particular role? That's something we're still investigating, but it's certainly something which is really interesting to me, and I'm really looking forward to continuing that project.
I have so many questions, but let's start with the beginning. So when did you start to do
So I started this project in December 2020. I think that was when we received the funding for it. So we did a little bit of preparing, a little bit of planning so that we could pitch for it, for the grant. And then we got the funding and we actually started on things in December of 2020. And now January 2022, still going.
Cool. So how did you decide, how did you get the idea and decide to apply for the grant?
So I will, hand on heart, it wasn't really my idea. Mm-hmm. At the time, I was working for my ACS committee, which is the African Caribbean Society. And so during that year, I attended a lot of university events to understand what the university's thoughts were on certain topics, especially ones that pertained to African and Caribbean people. So I attended some of the events that the university held during Black History Month in order for me to understand what the university was thinking, making sure they weren't doing anything which we needed to call them out for or hold them accountable for, and also so I could report back to the rest of the committee, make sure that the students within the student body of the ACS understood what was going on, understood what the university was saying, and make sure that if they had anything to comment, their opinions were heard. So I attended a discussion by some of the lecturers at my uni. So they were talking about the experiences of students at the university and how they could work on introducing new voices into the curriculum. And one of the lecturers mentioned that she did want to study this more and she did want to work on it. And then I decided that was something that I was interested in as well. So I ended up reaching out to her and she set me up with some other students who had also reached out to her, professed a similar interest, and we decided to go through. And very fortunately, my university had a fund. So if you had a project that you felt would tackle racism, I think the specific name was student-led anti-racism projects that they were funding, then they would provide you with a grant of your request in order to complete that project. And so we applied and we got it.
That's amazing. And did you know these other students before?
Previously, I didn't know the two girls who I was working with. They were just introduced to me by the lecturer who was at the talk. However, we're really good friends now. We have a group chat. It's really cool.
That's so cool. And so how did you start? How did you actually start to do stuff?
We definitely looked down a couple of avenues. So we initially started with creating a plan because that's what we needed to share in order to get the grant. So we initially created a plan of how we wanted to conduct the project. And we definitely had some large scale ideas. So we had to sort of narrow those down. So we wanted to focus on the politics department and we had specific questions that we wanted to answer. So we created that plan and submitted it. And essentially we had a couple of avenues that we wanted to go down. So we wanted to do some social media work. So we created an Instagram account and we shared informational graphics and materials to sort of help inform everybody at the university of what we were doing, as well as resources for them to understand the topic of decolonisation more. So we started with that, and then we also did some surveys. So we shared a lot of surveys with people who studied politics to understand more about how they thought the curriculum was at the time. So was it diverse? Did it include a variety of voices? No, yes, maybe. And then they would share their feedback with us, and that gave us some more questions to ask the university and more things that we wanted to include in our research.
So cool, so interesting. And so when you're doing that kind of study, do you also ask for ethnicity background?
Yeah, so we did in some of our surveys ask for people's like ethnicities and nationalities for the reason that we wanted to make sure our report was balanced and it included a range of perspectives. And especially when you're looking at decolonisation, you want to make sure that the marginalised voices within the university and that community are heard. So we wanted to make sure that we were hearing from Black and ethnic minority students as well, and students from marginalised backgrounds within the university, because we wanted them to be heard. We wanted to hear their perspective, as it is so integral to our research. So we wanted to make sure that we heard them. I think we got a range of people in our focus groups and filling in our surveys, so that was really, really useful. But one thing I definitely want to mention is we took answers from everybody. I think especially, so I study at the University of Exeter, and for that university with such a private school white populace, I think some people thought that we were trying to push a certain narrative or to remove certain perspectives from the syllabus, which is completely not the case. We just wanted to create, and we still do want to create, more of a range of voices within our curriculum and our syllabi.
So interesting.
Thank you.
So you're creating a report, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of when you want to have it done?
Not at the moment. We definitely have been on schedule and off schedule a couple of times, but we're definitely working towards it and we hope to publish it at some point.
Cool.
It's very much in the air, but we are working on it.
Nice. And do you have any action recommendations for your university of things they should implement or things they should be doing better, stuff like that? Have you planned or thought about it at all?
Definitely. So we have things that we want to do. We want to create a toolkit for the staff and lecturers. What was the question again? Sorry.
If you had any
Yeah, so I think working for the ACS and being part of that committee, I was very much exposed to a lot of different ways of understanding and different ways in which people tried to be allies, mostly well-intentioned, I must say, but I think we always have to be extra cautious, and we should always be very considerate and think through what we want to do, especially because I was working for the ACS in 2020, which, as we know, was a really poignant year. The death of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter protests, there was a lot going on in that year. So to be part of the African Caribbean Society, which for my university is a major populace of Black students, I think I had to be very considerate of the opportunities that we took on and the ones which we declined, as well as the rest of the committee, because it was always a joint decision. I would always say, make sure that you are respecting and amplifying the voices of Black people. When you're doing your research, when you're looking to become a better ally, you need to look at the source and you need to look at the centre of focus here. So if you're trying to be a better ally to women and you're trying to understand women's rights more, then you should look at women and you should look at that research. You should work to make sure you're understanding their voices. And same with Black people, same with LGBTQ rights, and the list goes on. So I would say be hyper conscious that you're centering your research and your understanding on the correct people, and making sure that you are using the wealth of resources that the internet and literature can provide you, because there's so much out there. I think a lot of Black people, and I don't want to speak too generally, obviously, but a lot of people during 2020 were being asked a lot of questions about their race, and were being asked a lot of questions which a lot of people are very comfortable to field, but sometimes it can get exhausting and sometimes it can be quite difficult. So I always say, make sure that you can do your own research, you can search for yourself, and don't just try and seek the answers from the nearest person that you see. I'd love to recommend some more books. So I would definitely recommend those published by Murky Books. So obviously Stormzy, if you know. I would recommend looking at critical race theory and critical theory of all kinds, if I'm honest. So that is the process of understanding where sources come from, understanding what kind of literature and what kind of media you are consuming and where it's coming from. I feel like with a lot of media, it's meant to portray a certain message, or it was created by a person of a particular background for a particular reason. And it's really important to understand why exactly they created that, because it might not have been as well intentioned as people like to assume. So I would definitely recommend critical theory. I feel like critical theory has changed my perspective on a lot of things. So things which initially I was told were objective, they were fact. Critical theory has actually allowed me to re-examine them and realize actually these are not as straightforward or as clear-cut as I initially thought that they were. So I would definitely recommend learning about critical theory, trying to understand more of the marginalized voices within your community, what exactly it means to be an ally within that community, and what things you should be hyper conscious of when you're walking around from day to day, and how that can impact another person from your community very differently.
Thank you so much for sharing. This
No
is so
worries.
interesting. As a white person, I cannot obviously relate to like race conversation, but I guess as a woman, I can also see how exhausting it is from a woman perspective to like educate men.
Yeah.
And this is so annoying. So like having it's just like make your own research, people.
Yeah.
If it's okay for me to ask, how do you manage that emotionally?
So I think definitely I get asked a lot of questions, particularly within the roles which I've been in. So being part of the ACS committee, being a black business owner, just being in environments where I might be the only black person in the room. I definitely get asked a lot of questions, and I've definitely had to learn patience. Obviously, as you get older and you become more established and you meet more people, the questions only continue to grow. And so I've had to learn patience with them sometimes, because initially I will say I didn't understand why people were asking me questions, especially when Google is free. But I understand that it's always well intentioned and it's always well meaning. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm able to answer those questions with more understanding and more clarity. I think it's just the constant understanding and recognition that when people ask me questions or when people say things, they don't mean it with malice. It's often well-intentioned, often their hearts are clean. And there are times when people will critique what I'm doing or what I'm saying, or they'll question my experiences. And there are particular situations where people will critique my experiences, critique the validity of them, and I just have to understand that I can't save everyone, I can't educate everyone, and not everybody needs or not everybody wants to be educated. And I think there was a period of time where I didn't understand that. I feel like I took on the responsibility of being the educator to everyone, or I thought I could take on that responsibility. It was very misguided of me, and I guess a little bit big-headed of me to think that, because you can't help everyone. But I think coming to terms with the facts that I can't help everyone, and there will always be critics out there like who want to make comments on your work, might want to disparage what you're saying, things like that. I think coming to terms with that really helped me emotionally come to terms with the fact that I don't have to emotionally put myself out there, because talking about your experiences is being vulnerable and it can be really difficult sometimes. So I'm conscious that often when I speak about my experiences, I am putting myself out there emotionally. And obviously it will hurt when people try and comment on those things and try and critique them. So coming to the conclusion that not everybody will be interested in what I have to say, and some people will be a critic of my experiences, I feel like that has helped me emotionally to come to terms with those sorts of things.
And you talked earlier about the speaker,
Dr. Farah Miller.
And were there any other person who helped you going through that, as well as your two co-workers?
Yeah. So I would say a lot of the things that we did independently. So we didn't have all that much feedback when it came to our social media. It was mainly organised and created through us, and then we would cross-reference things. We'd give each other feedback on any like individual posts or things we wanted to make. I would say there are a lot of staff members within the politics department who were really helpful. So within the politics department, we have the diversity and inclusion team, and we met with them quite a few times to just make sure that the work that we were doing, they would understand it, because obviously we want them in future to take into account the research that we've done and hopefully implement some changes or create some recommendations formally within the university. So working with them, they've definitely helped. And then within the team that gave us the funding, there's a student incubator team. We had project managers and things like that who would help us answer big questions. When we wanted to hire a transcriber, they helped us with the interviews, and they have really been a source of help as well in terms of resources and how we manage the resources that they gave us. So we've definitely had some like outside support, but very much we have followed our path. We planned and organised everything, so we're sort of just like following our plan. And yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be a great outcome.
Yeah, I hope so. Obviously, you can't plan or predict how people will take your feedback. So you just have to make sure that you have the research to back it up and your recommendations are a result of the findings which you have. So I've learned so much about the process over the past year or so, but yeah, you can't really predict what the end result will be.
Cool. And what challenges did you face since you started?
I faced so many challenges. Can we make that question more general in terms of like what challenges I just faced full stop? Because I feel like I can talk about like my business experiences as well.
Okay.
So regarding challenges, I feel like life is a challenge. And not yeah, not to be a cynic, but life can be challenging sometimes, and sometimes you just want to descend into nihilism and just think the world is pointless. However, I think some challenges which I have experienced through the research is people questioning its validity or its relevance, people not understanding why we need to do research into decolonising the curriculum, not recognising a need for decolonising the curriculum. And to be fair, I think that is expected. I think there's always going to be people who are going to make comments questioning the relevance of your work, especially when it's to do with amplifying voices. When you haven't heard a particular voice before, how do you know it's not going to follow the same realm of thinking of your own? I understand why people think that way. I don't necessarily agree that it's right. So yeah, I think that's been a challenge, and it goes into how I also emotionally manage myself, because I don't have the emotional capacity to educate everyone. I have to preserve myself and my mental health and make sure that I am not always vulnerable. I can't always be open about the experiences that I have faced in my life, and I can't constantly be educating people because that is exhausting. There are resources out there, and so if somebody is truly willing to put the effort in, then they won't just look to me as the sole educator. They will do research into their own resources. They will look at what is out there, because there is a lot out there. So I would definitely say that facing scrutiny and facing critique has been a challenge. Another challenge which I faced is being the odd one out, in the sense that I can be the youngest in a room that I'm in. I might be the only black person, I might be the only woman. And obviously when those things cross over, being the youngest, only black girl in the room, there's intersectionality within those sorts of things. But I'm hyper conscious that because I'm young, sometimes people don't take me seriously. And that presents a challenge because they will assume certain things about my character. And that presents a challenge challenge because that will mean that people assume certain things about my knowledge or my character, which aren't necessarily true. I can be very determined, and sometimes I can be pretty eloquent about my thoughts. So I like to make sure that I consistently come across that way, and I'm challenging those thought processes of those people. However, initially that will always present a challenge, because when people hold certain thoughts about you, or they can be prejudiced in some kind of way, then you're not only working to present yourself in a particular light, you're also working to challenge their initial impressions. So that can take some time. But ultimately, I just do my best. Like, I'm very conscious that despite all of the challenges that I face, I will fall in the face of a few of them. I'm only human and I can only do so much. So I do just like to do my best, and hopefully my best is enough to overcome those challenges. But if it isn't, then it's a learning experience.
That's so wise. That's such a good way to look at things.
I feel like that comes from my parents a little bit. They always have told me that I will face challenges in my life. Them coming to this country 30 years ago. So learning from my parents, their experiences coming to this country, I certainly know I'm going to face challenges. I certainly know that I'm going to approach some kind of difficulty, and I've had my fair share of them already. But understanding that I will learn from each one of them has helped me overcome and understand a lot of like adversity and stuff.
Cool. Yeah. I hope life is easy on you.
If only I could truly wish life was easy on people, and then it was. Like, life is never an easy or a straight road, but you just do your best.
Yeah. Were there things that you found were easier than you thought it would have been?
To be fair, oftentimes I do overthink things. I'm constantly questioning myself and questioning some of the decisions which I make. I can be kind of indecisive sometimes. So I feel like there are definitely things which I think will be harder than they truly are. Something which was easier than I initially thought it would be was taking my placement year. So at the moment, I've completed 2 years of university, and my third year of university is working. So I'm working at the same tech startup that Lucy is, and I've been doing that since June. And I was under the impression that that would be super difficult. I thought getting the role and adjusting to it would be really hard, but I'm very fortunate that I have a good team. Everyone is very accepting and understanding, and so that has been a bit more streamlined than I initially thought it would be. So I'm very grateful for that. However, it definitely could have been more challenging. I have to be conscious of that, so I'm grateful that it wasn't.
Cool. Do you want to talk a bit also about your company?
I think I'm very conscious that I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's not just research while I'm at uni. I also have an online stationery store, which I've run since I was 17. I've also designed and created a whole planner brand. So I design and create planners, and I do all the marketing and advertising for that as well. I also do public speaking. So occasionally schools or communities or organisations will ask me to talk to their students about goal setting and time management off the back of creating a diary or a planner, which is all about organising, setting goals, managing your time, etc, etc. So I feel like I do a lot. I feel like I've always done a lot. When I was younger, I actually used to review books. I say it semi-professionally, and yeah, Lucy, sorry, I haven't told you about this before.
And just like the more it goes, the more you've done everything.
I've always done a lot, and I've loved doing a lot with my life. I've loved exploring different avenues, and I always think it's very important to me to venture down an avenue for as long as possible, to learn as much as possible from it, to gain as much experience, as many learnings as possible. So when I was 11 or 12, I started reviewing books for authors, reviewing books which hadn't even come out yet. That was really exciting. And so I used to receive books from different publishing houses, and they would ask my thoughts on them and ask me to help promote them, because I had a blog at the time as well. And so I feel like I've always done a lot, but one thing that has always helped me with that is time management and organisation, and making sure that I know what I should be doing when I'm doing it, and balancing all of that with academia. I've always been a student. I've always gone to school to either do my GCSEs and A-levels, so like my qualifications, and then getting into uni and studying more. I've always had to prioritise balance, and that did not answer answer the question at all. I
can't remember the question, to be completely honest with you. So that's absolutely fine. But I have a new question now. How do you do? Like, how do you find time to do everything? How do you manage your time?
I definitely have my highs and lows when it comes to organising my time. I feel like I've just gotten out of a low the past couple of months when I was trying to organise work-life balance, especially during this placement year and working full-time. I found it really difficult to create a routine that worked for me and get everything done that I wanted to. So I feel like it's definitely been a process and it has its peaks and troughs. As I said, just gotten out of one of those like lows. I've gotten out of a trough. But having a routine is really, really good for me. I really do thrive on structure. So creating like a morning routine and an evening routine, organising like what days I want to go to the gym and what days I'm going to be focusing on certain things, and just keeping track of including the things which I think are really important within my routine really helps me to ensure that I'm keeping things consistent within my life. And it also helps to make sure that all of the things that I enjoy get included in my day. Because if I had the day to myself without any structure, without any plans, nothing's getting done. I will sit in front of my TV and watch Netflix and chill, and most likely I won't even enjoy that day very much, because the things that I enjoy are active activities, the things that I fill my life with. And so there just needs to be some semblance of structure to make sure that I can get those things done. In addition to having that structure, just keeping track of things. So making sure that I know the last time that I went to the gym, so I know when to include it again in my routine, or making sure that I'm talking to my family members consistently. So sometimes I'll make a note that, oh, I haven't spoken to my older sister in a couple of weeks. Let me go and call her today, so that I'm keeping track with other people's lives. And then I'd also say reflection. So I think over the past few years, I've become more and more reflective. I will just think about how the past week, the past day, the past month has gone and how I feel about it. So if I feel like I just don't have enough structure, I'm feeling a little bit lost, I can easily come to the conclusion that I just need a bit more structure, and I can change the way that I've shaped my life. So if I feel like things are getting a bit overwhelmed, there's a bit too much structure and things are feeling a bit too rigid, then I give myself a bit more flexibility, and I can put things on the back burner and say, you know what, this week I'm not going to go to the gym as much, or I'm not going to proactively call all of my friends each and every day, or I'm not going to meal prep or something like that. I can put some of those responsibilities to the side and just focus on my well-being. But one thing I have learned, and I definitely want to stress, is that I give myself grace. Like, I'm not perfect. As much as I like structure and I like things to be in a particular way and do things by a particular method and a routine, I understand that not everything's going to happen like that. And I think I've just had to have room for that flexibility and room for the days where I don't feel like I'm being as productive and things like that. So managing my time and having loads of routines has helped. Keeping track of what I'm doing so that I can put it into the routines, and then ultimately reflecting at the end of the day and thinking, is this pleasing me? Is this bringing me joy? And then if not, giving myself the grace and the flexibility to change it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
No worries.
I am definitely going to steal some of these tips.
Oh, yeah. I think the one about giving myself grace is one I've learned recently. I used to put a lot of pressure on myself to achieve things which ultimately are not realistic. I would just get burnt out because I would ask myself to wake up at 6:30 and go to bed at 11 every day and do all of these things and track what I wanted to do by the minute. And I did train myself in some ways to sort of like follow routines really well, and it's something which I enjoy, so ultimately I thrive in it. But no one can follow a minute by minute routine. And it took me a while to realize that, but once I did, I realized I can give myself grace and give myself flexibility, and ultimately giving myself that flexibility is also how I show that I care for myself. Like understanding that as much as I have goals and I want to achieve a lot of things and do a lot with my life, ultimately I can sit back and relax because the world isn't going anywhere. Like I can take a break for a bit, and when I open my door, the world will still be there. I can still carry on and progress like I didn't need to take a break, like nothing's really happened. and have patience with yourself, because I feel like when people are so rigid with their goals and they're like really structured, it can be really good, because if you're determined and you're driven towards those goals, then it pushes you towards them. You really feel propelled towards them, towards achieving them. But then it also has a bad side in the sense of you're so harsh on yourself. In philosophy, we studied this whole topic of phenomenology, which is complicated. So I'm just gonna like summarize like one element of it, in the sense that you can live your life and be the subject of it, where you live and you feel everything that you express, or you can be the object of it, in the sense of rather than being in the first person, you're in the third person. You're watching yourself navigate life. But yeah, I think that when you're harsh on yourself, you don't necessarily recognize your humanity. You don't recognize that you're fallible in some ways. You don't recognize that you can make mistakes. You might not do something the way that you want to do it. And you don't recognize as well the world's impact on your actions. Sometimes it's just not possible for you to do things, but you can't let that impact your mental health and your emotional health. You need to just recognize that the world won't be perfect. The world won't follow exactly what you want to do. And it took me a really long time to realize that. But ultimately, when I started to realize that, that's when the grace came in. That's when the flexibility came in. And I was able to combat those negative thoughts where I consider myself a failure when I didn't achieve the goals that I wanted in a particular time frame. I just learned to adjust. And ultimately, I keep on saying the word grace, but I feel like it's something which I have just had to learn. And it's just such a beautiful word in my mind, because it just reminds me of the fact that I'm not perfect, but that's okay. And as a result, I can mold my life around this idea where I can give myself that flexibility. And in times of confusion and disappointment and feeling like I'm not enough, it reminds me that I am enough and that everything that I'm doing is okay.
Thank you so much for sharing.
No worries.
I think on these beautiful words, we're gonna conclude this episode. So thank you again for coming and for sharing all of this. And as usual in this podcast, the guest has this final word, so the mic is yours.
Okay, so I'm gonna start by saying thank you, Lucy, for having me on the podcast. And my final words would definitely be: pursue the things that spark your interest. I have so many interests. I love research. I have done research into my own experiences. I love my degree. I read beyond my degree. I love reading full stop. I've reviewed books. Like, there's so many things which I've done in my life which have brought me so much joy and sparked my interest. And I would definitely say just take the time to explore the things that spark your interest too. Give yourself grace. I think that's something which is so important. Grace is a beautiful thing. And if you don't feel like you're giving yourself that flexibility in your life, introduce more flexibility into your life. And I'm going to say one final thing. One thing which I definitely thought when I knew I had the final word was ask yourself if what you're doing today is something that you'll thank yourself for tomorrow. So I feel like the two things which I've mentioned in terms of giving yourself grace and pursuing your interests are things that you will thank yourself for because they've brought you joy. And so I would definitely say keep on considering that question. Continue to ask yourself if what you're doing right now or what you're doing today is something that you'll thank yourself for or look upon fondly in the future.